Welcome back to another episode of SmoothBrainEDH, where you make the smoothest plays with the biggest brains. We are super excited to get to bring around some of the new commanders from March of the Machine, so let's see what everyone brought to the table. Our first player today is Kaden on Zurgo and Ojutai. This is a Jeskai deck focused around dragons, using the commander to gain card advantage whenever they hit opponents. Kaden starts the game with the Plains, Command Tower, Spectator Seating, Clifftop Retreat, Cavern of Souls, Kindred Discovery, and Goldspan Dragon. Up next is Cody on Elenda and Azor. This Esper deck plans to draw a ton of cards, then flood the board with tokens thanks to his commander's triggered ability on each instep. He keeps a hand with a swamp, a snow-covered swamp, Sea of Clouds, Morphic Pool, Fellwar Stone, Black Market Connections, and Toxic Deluge. Third is Cameron on Etali, Primal Conqueror. This is a Gruul deck that, in Cameron's own words, goes Oonga Boonga, steals opponent's cards. He opts to keep 2 mountains, Cinderglade, Ancient Tomb, Utopia Sprawl, Jessica's Will, and Jaxus the Troublemaker. Last up is Seth on Rashmi and Ragavan. This is a teamer deck that, in Cameron's words, goes Oonga Boonga, steal opponent's cards, but artifacts and in blue. He keeps a Forest, Command Tower, Misty Rainforest, Heroic Intervention, Wheel of Fortune, Bloom of Tinder, and Faldorn Dreadwolf Herald. We're about to hop right into the game, but before that, go ahead and give us a like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any of our new content. We post new gameplay videos every week, so you won't want to miss any of it. Big shout out to our patrons. We really appreciate all support. Link to our Patreon is in the description, as well as the links to the deck lists, our social media, our podcast channel, and our public Discord server. Our channel is partnered with Dragon Shield, so you can pick up any new sleeves or magic-related products. Check out the affiliate link in the description. We are also partnered with Inked Gaming, so if you're looking to make any custom playmats, use our affiliate link in the description as well. Now, on to the gameplay.
It looks like Seth wins the die roll, and he'll start off with Misty Rainforest and immediately crack it for a Ketria Triumph, then he'll pass to Kaden. Kaden plays his Clifftop Retreats, and then he'll pass to Cody, who will play Morphic Pool and pass to Cameron. Cameron plays Spire Garden and passes to Seth. Seth will then play Command Tower, and then he'll tap for 2 to cast his Bloom Tender, and then he'll pass to Kaden. Kaden will play Command Tower, and then he'll tap for 1 to cast the Soul Ring he top decked. The turn is then passed to Cody, and then he'll play Sea of Clouds, and then he'll tap for 2 to cast Fellwar Stone, and then he'll pass the turn to Cameron. And Cameron will play his tap Cinderglade, and then he'll tap for 1 green to Utopia Sprawl it, naming green. And then he'll pass the turn. On his turn, Seth will play a Spire Garden, and then he'll tap for 4 and cast Rashmi and Ragavan. And then the turn is passed. Kaden will start off with a Cavern of Souls, obviously naming dragons, and then he'll cast his Goldspan Dragon, and then he'll move to combat. He'll swing for 4 in the air at Cameron, and he'll get a treasure token upon attacking. The turn is then passed to Cody after this. And he'll start off with a Snow Swamp, and then he'll tap for 3 to cast Raffine. And then the turn is passed, and Cameron starts off with an Ancient Tomb. He'll then tap for 3 and cast Jessica's Will, targeting Seth, who has 6 in hand, and he takes 2 to his Ancient Tomb. It'll resolve, and so he floats 6 red mana, and then he'll tap for the rest he needs to cast Etali, Primal Conqueror. It'll resolve, so everybody starts exiling the top cards of their library. Seth hits a Talisman of Impulse, Kaden a Mana Drain, and Cody a Whirlpool Rider. And Etali says each player, but Cameron thinks it says each opponent at first. He fixes this later in his turn, and he hits a Nature's Lore. So Cameron will cast everything that's hit, and since he is allowed to counter things on the stack if he hits a counter, he points the Mana Drain at the Whirlpool Rider because he wants to keep his hand. After the whole stack resolves, he'll then tap his Talisman for a green, taking a damage, and then he'll cast Llanowar Elves. He then remembers to resolve that Nature's Lore, and he'll find a Sheltered Thicket, and then he'll pass the turn to Seth. And Seth will start off with a basic Forest. He'll then tap for 6, thanks to his Bloom Tender being able to tap for Teamer, and he'll cast Brutaclad. There is a Rashmi and Ragavan trigger, so Seth will target Cameron, make a treasure, and then Cameron exiles a land. After this, Seth will move to combat, and Brutaclad will make a 2-1 mirror, and then he decides to have all of his tokens be 2-1 mirrors, so his treasure will turn into 1. And then the turn is passed to Kaden, who starts off with a Spectator Seating, and then he'll cast a Dragon Speaker Shaman. Then he'll cast a Talisman of Conviction, and then he'll cast Zurgo and Ojutai. After this, he'll move to combat, and he'll swing Goldspan Dragon at Seth, and Zurgo and Ojutai at Cody. Goldspan trigger, and they both just take their 4 damage. And when they do, Zurgo and Ojutai will trigger, and Kaden gets to look at the top 3 cards of his library, put 1 into his hand, and rest on the bottom of his library. Zurgo and Ojutai are bounced to hand, and then he'll cast a Dragon's Horde. And then the turn is passed to Cody. And he'll start off with an Ancient Tomb as land for turn. And then he'll cast a Black Market Connections. Cody will then move to combat, and he'll swing for 1 at Kaden, and he'll get to connive for 1. He'll draw a card and then discard a swamp and put a 1/1 counter on Rafine. Now this is incorrect, you only get the counter if you discard a non-land card, but we catch it later, so I'm only marking Caden for the actual one. The turn is then passed to Cameron, and he'll start off by casting a Shadow in the Warp. And then he'll blitz out a Jaxus the Troublemaker. Cody realizes what's going on here, so he'll Path to Exile Etali so Cameron doesn't get any extra triggers this turn. Shadow in the Warp triggers, and then Etali is exiled, and Cameron gets a Forest. And with his evil plan foiled, Cameron doesn't have much to do, so he'll just move to end step. Jaxus will die, and he'll draw a card, and then the turn is passed to Seth. And Seth will start off by casting a 5-mana Junkwinder. Rashmi and Ragavan trigger, and he targets Cameron again. So he'll make a treasure, and Cameron exiles Terror of the Peaks. Now Seth can't cast it for free this turn, but he still gets a chance to cast it. So he'll start by moving to combat, and Brutaclad will make another 2/1 mirror, and then he'll have all of his tokens turn into treasure tokens. Then during combat, he swings Brutaclad at Cameron, and Rashmi and Ragavan at Caden, and they both have to take it. And when the 2/1 mirror token is created, Junkwinder will tap down Goldspan Dragon. Post-combat, the Terror is cast, and then the turn is passed to Caden. And Caden will start off with his basic plains, and then he'll drop Dragon Tempest. Shadow in the Warp triggers, and then Caden will tap for 3 and cast Zurgo and Ojutai again. This will trigger both Dragon Horde and Dragon Tempest. And with Dragon Tempest, he'll deal 2 to Bloom Tender, killing it. After this, he'll move to combat, and he'll swing for 4 Commander at Cameron, and upon connecting, he gets to look at the top 3 again and keep 1. And he decides to not bounce any dragons, and then post-combat, he'll cast Thassa, Deep Dwelling. After this, he'll move to end step and blink Zurgo and Ojutai, and this will trigger Dragon's Horde and Dragon Tempest again. And this time, the Tempest goes to Seth's face. The turn is then passed to Cody, and on his first main phase, Black Market Connections will trigger, and he'll pay 3 life to make a treasure and draw a card. Then he'll play an untapped Hallowed Fountain, taking 2 damage, and then he moves to combat and swings Rafine at Cameron, and this time we actually realize how Connive works, so he'll discard a Sanctum Seeker and actually get that 1 counter. Cameron takes his 2, then post-combat, Cody will tap for 3 mana to cast Toxic Deluge, and he'll pay 6 life into it, and Shadow in the Warp makes him take another 2. Cameron says he is a-okay with this board wipe, and then it'll resolve. Cody will then move to his end step, then he'll tap for 5 to cast Necrologia, and since Cameron never reads his cards, he thinks Shadow in the Warp goes off again, so Cody will take 2 here. He'll then resolve the Necrologia, and since he only has 2 cards in hand, he'll pay 5 life to draw 5 cards. And since he was on his end step, he'll then just pass the turn to Cameron. And thanks to Shadow of the Warp, Cameron will then just immediately tap for 7 and recast Etali. He'll take 2 from Ancient Tomb and 1 from the Talisman because for some reason he tapped it for a green mana. Then Etali resolves. Seth hits a Felwar Stone, Caden a Distant Melodies, Cody hits Braid's Arisen Nightmare, and Cameron hits the new Chandra, Hope's Beacon. And so he'll cast them all for free, and he gets to draw a card off the Distant Melodies. After this, he +1 Chandra to exile the top 5 cards of his library, and I apologize for the glare, there was a sunroof above us, and in the previous game we recorded, it wasn't this bad, so we didn't notice. And the only instant or sorcery among those 5 cards was a Kodama's Reach. Cameron will then move to his end step, and since he's the only one with creatures, he'll sacrifice Braids to herself to draw 3 cards and cause his opponents to each lose 3 life. The turn is then passed. And Seth's not really a fan of his hand anymore, so he taps for 3 and casts Wheel of Fortune. Shadow in the Warp trigger, and it'll resolve, so everyone will discard their hands and draw a fresh 7. After this, he'll play a Tree of Tales as land for turn, then he'll tap for 2 to cast Silvermere, and then the turn is passed to Caden, who will start off with a Pillar Verge Pathway as land for turn, and then he'll tap for 4 and cast Smothering Tithe, Shadow trigger, and then he casts Talisman of Creativity, and then he'll pass the turn to Cody, who does not pay 2 in his draw step, and then he'll pay 3 to Black Market Connections to draw a card and make a treasure, and he doesn't pay for Smothering Tithe again. He'll then play a Command Tower as land for turn, and then he casts Consecrated Sphinx. The turn will then be passed to Cameron, and on his upkeep, Caden will pay 4 to Thassa to tap down Etali. Cody will then draw 2 when Cameron draws 1, and no Smothering Tithes are paid. Cameron then +2 Chandra to get 2 red mana, and then he'll cast Twin Flame targeting Etali, and Chandra will copy it. Caden says, well, that's a little too much, so he decides to counterspell one of the copies of Twin Flame. And so Cameron gets a token copy with haste of Etali, and when Legend Rule applies, he decides to sacrifice his original. The ETB trigger will then resolve, and Seth flips into a second Harvest, Caden a Balefire Dragon, Cody a Talisman of Hierarchy, and Cameron a Solemn Simulacrum, and he casts all of them for free. So, after all of this resolves, he gets another copy of Etali, so everybody starts flipping again. This time, Seth flips into the original Rashmi, Caden Ancient Gold Dragon, Cody Dark Deal, and Cameron Voyager Staff. He decides to not cast the Dark Deal, so he'll get the Ancient Gold Dragon, Rashmi, and the Voyager Staff. Cameron's not done though, so he'll tap for 11 mana, taking 2 to Ancient Tomb, and recast his original Etali in the command zone, and he'll sacrifice the token with haste, hoping he'll find something to give his whole board haste. So when the ETB resolves, Seth exiles Bootlegger Stash, Caden Boros Signet, Cody Chromatic Lantern, and Cameron Soul Ring. And he'll cast all 4 for free. But he's not done yet. He'll sacrifice his Voyager Staff to exile the Etali, and then he'll move to his end step, and it'll come back, and we repeat the cycle. Seth hits Simic Signet, Caden Utfara Hellkite, Cody Tolarian Winds, and Cameron Farseek, and he'll cast them all except for Tolarian Winds. Cameron finds a mountain off the Farseek, and then he'll pass the turn to Seth. Tithe isn't paid, and Seth will start off with a forest, and then he'll tap for 3 to cast Elmar, Ulvenwald Informant. He'll then cast Urza, Lord High Artificer, and after the Urza resolves, he'll have netted a Construct and a Clue. The turn is then passed. On draw step, Cody will draw 2, and then he doesn't pay for Smothering Tithe. After this, Caden will draw 1 off Dragon's Horde, Cody will draw 2, and continues to not pay for Smothering Tithe. Caden will then spend 7 mana to cast Ojutai Soul of Winter. Dragon Tempest trigger goes at Cameron's face, and then he'll cast Zurgo in Ojutai, and the Dragon Tempest trigger will go at Cameron's face again. Cameron has 3 flyers that can block Caden's creatures. They have haste because of Dragon Tempest, so Caden will pay 4 mana to Thassa to tap down one of them, and then he'll move to combat and swing with both of his flyers, and Ojutai Soul of Winter will trigger, tapping down the other 2. Cameron will take 9 damage, and then Caden gets to look at the top 3, put 1 into his hand, and he'll choose to not bounce one of his dragons to his hand. After this, he'll move to his end step, and blink Zurgo and Ojutai, and when it re-enters the battlefield, he'll do 2 damage to Cameron with Dragon Tempest. The turn is then passed to Cody, who does not pay for Smothering Tithe, and then on his first main phase, since you have to pay to Black Market Connections, he'll make a treasure by paying a life. Cody will then tap for 3 and cast Quasar. After this, he'll play Miko Koro as land for a turn, and then he'll move to combat and swing for 4 in the air at Cameron, which is exactly lethal. And there are no responses at the table, so Cameron is dead. Cody will then cast a Soul Ring post-combat, and he'll use its mana to activate Miko Koro, making everybody draw a card. And because of Consecrated Sphinx, Cody will actually draw a total of 5. Only Seth pays for Smothering Tithe, and Cody gets 5 Quasar triggers. And they are all pointed at Caden. After this, Cody will cast a Wizard class, and then Shieldred the Apocalypse, and he has to take 2 to his Ancient Tomb. On Seth's draw step, Cody will also draw 2, so that means Seth will lose 2 to Shieldred, Cody will gain 4 to Shieldred, and then Quasar will trigger twice, and those will go at Caden. And no Smothering Tithes are paid. Now in his first main, Seth will play Silver Bluff Bridge, and then he'll cast an Arcane Signet. After this, he casts Rashmi and Ragavan again, and he does miss an Investigate trigger. The turn is then passed to Caden, but he'll stop on end step and pay 8 mana to Thassa to tap down 2 of Cody's blockers. Now on Caden's turn, we'll move to his draw step, and all the same triggers happen, but everything goes at Caden, so he'll lose 4, and Cody will gain 6. And no Smothering Tithes are paid. Caden will then activate Dragon's Horde to draw another card, and all the triggers remain the same. He'll then cast a Displacer Kitten, and then, and they shall know no fear, Displacer Kitten blinks one of the Ojutais, and upon re-entering the battlefield, Dragon Tempest will ping Cody for 2. He'll then move to combat and swing in the air for 11 at Cody. Soul of Winter triggers twice, and he'll tap down Shieldred and Consecrated Sphinx. They connect, and upon connecting, Caden gets to look at the top 3, put 1 into his hand, and then he'll bounce Zurgo and Ojutai to his hand. Post-combat, he'll cast an Idyllic Tutor. This will trigger Displacer Kitten, and he'll blink Ojutai Soul of Winter, and Dragon Tempest will deal 1 to Cody. With Idyllic Tutor, he finds but forgets to show Teleportation Circle, and then he'll recast Zurgo and Ojutai. Dragon Tempest will deal 2 to Cody, and then he'll move to his end step, blink Zurgo and Ojutai, which Dragon Tempest will do another 2 to Cody, and then he'll pass the turn to Cody. And at the start of his turn, there's a bit of a miscommunication. Caden tries to tell him that Shieldred and Consecrated Sphinx are tapped, but Cody accidentally taps all 3 of his creatures. Then on Cody's draw step, Shieldred and Quasar will trigger, Quasar goes at Seth, and Tithe isn't paid for. Then on first main, he'll make that treasure and lose a life. After this, he'll play an island as land for turn, and then he'll cast a Brainstorm. After it resolves, he'll get 3 Shieldred triggers and 3 Quasar triggers, which go at Seth. And in all honesty, I looked at the footage. There are no Smothering Tithe triggers that are paid after this point, so I'm just going to stop announcing them. After this, Cody activates Miko Koro, making everybody draw a card, but because of Consecrated Sphinx, Cody gets to draw a total of 5, so he gets 5 Shieldred triggers and 5 Quasar triggers, which go at Seth. After this, Cody will cast Jace Perfected Mind, and he'll downtick him to make Caden mill 3, and then the highest graveyard at this time is 16, so he'll draw 1 card. Triggers Quasar at Seth. And thanks to this draw, Cody finally has a way to actually kill people for sure. He'll cast Teferi's Puzzle Box, taking 2 from his Ancient Tomb. Seth has a response though, and thanks to his Urza, he's able to tap 2 artifacts for 2 blue and cast Memory Lapse on it. Cody will put it to the top of his library, and now he's tapped out, so he'll pass the turn to Seth. It is do or die for he and Caden. Triggers upon drawing, and Quasar goes at Caden. Seth will then start his turn off by tapping for 3 and casting Academy Manufactor. Rashmi and Ragavan trigger. He makes a treasure and targets Caden, and unfortunately it's a land. And with not much to do in his hand, Seth decides to pay 5 to activate Urza. He'll shuffle his library, and then play the top card for free. That top card is a Darksteel Citadel, a little disappointing, but he hasn't made a land drop yet, so he'll play it from exile. And then thanks to Urza and having a lot of artifacts to tap, Seth decides to just go ahead and spin the wheel again. And this time he hits Inspiring Statuary, which isn't really a saving grace, but it's good to have, so he'll cast it for free, and he remembers to investigate this time. And this time he makes a clue, a treasure, and a food. He'll then move to combat and full swing everything at Cody. It's a total of 20 damage, 13 of which is from the Construct. But before damage, Cody will sacrifice his treasure, 2 swords to Plowshares the Construct, gaining Seth 13 life. And then the rest of the damage goes through, so Cody takes 7. The turn is then passed to Caden, and there are triggers on draw step. Quasar goes at Caden. Then, on first main, Caden will cast Sneak Attack. The kitten will trigger, blinking Zurgo and Ojutai, triggering Dragon Tempest, which goes at Cody's face. Caden will then tap for a red to put Astral Dragon into play. And the 2 copies he makes? Well, Dragon Tempest. When it ETBs, he'll do 3 damage to Cody's face, and then when the other 2 copies enter the battlefield, they are dragons and Dragon Tempests, they'll do 2 instances of 5 to Cody's face. Then he'll tap for 4 and cast Teleportation Circle, which triggers the kitten, blinking Astral Dragon, and when it enters the battlefield again, there's a bunch more Dragon Tempest triggers, and then he gets to make 2 more Dragon Tempests, which will then trigger the other Dragon Tempests even more. Oh my god, I'm not even sure how much damage that is, but if it's not enough, all he has to do is then move to end step, and then the Circle or Thassa will blink the Astral Dragon again, and oh my god, this is just crazy. That's a lot of Dragon Tempest triggers. Moral of the story, there's no responses at the table, and everyone is hella dead. Except for Caden. So, way to go, man. You won with Dragon Tribal. Way to go, everybody. That was an amazing game. Thank you all for watching. And one thing I'd like to say first off is thank you, Seth, for joining us. This was actually his first game with us here at SmoothBrainEDH. If you guys enjoyed his deck, be sure to let him know. We're hoping he shows up for even more. If it wasn't his deck you're here for, let us know whose you were here for, and let us know what you thought of the game. And while you're down there, don't forget to check out all of our links in the descriptions, and like and subscribe. If you're looking forward to more March of the Machines commanders, be sure to tune in next week. We'll have some brand new ones to show you. But that is all for today, you guys. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you all have a smooth day.